BPI Sports has always been a massive supporter of natural bodybuilding, so it only made sense for us and them to partner up. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by BPI Sports, and if you want to support them and us, use code Natty News Daily at checkout for some exclusive discounts off any of your orders. Enjoy the episode. What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of Natty News Daily. We've got a special guest on tonight, Mr. Nsima Inyang. Dude, I'm going to let you give the intro because I think, in the natural bodybuilding world, you've been kind of out of the game for a while, so to speak. So tell the people what you're all about, man.
Yeah, it's funny. So I'm Nsima. I've been lifting since I was 13, so for 16 years. I initially started, though, as like an athlete. So I started as a soccer player when I was 6 years old. Played for 15 years, got injured in college. And then, along with bodybuilding, which my last competition was back in 2015,
Yep.
I started doing jiu-jitsu a little bit afterwards that, and I also did a bit of powerlifting in that time. In the period that I thought was going to be my off season, but just turned into like just training jiu-jitsu and training.
Yeah.
And that's been it. So now I co-host the Mark Bell's Power Project, where we have a lot of cool people come on. I get to learn, which I love. I am extremely grateful for what I get to do every day because I just get to learn the things that I'm personally interested in, apply it to myself, and give that information out. And it's a lot of fucking fun. And
that's awesome, man. Yeah, so that's how I kind of stumbled upon you, is through Mark Bell. So like I've been following Mark Bell myself for quite some time, and then obviously through the podcast, got wind of yourself, and then it's like, okay, all of a sudden I hear you talk about competing and bodybuilding, and I'm like, okay, we'll do a little research on this. Well, shit, man's WNBF pro back in 2015, right?
Yeah, I got my pro card in the WNBF in 2015. I got it in the INBA and NGA in INBA Pro Card 2013, NGA Pro Card 2014.
Yep.
And WNBF Pro Card 2015. Yep.
And you got it up in my neck of the woods up here in Canada, correct?
Yeah. No, actually, I didn't get. That was my pro show. I didn't.
Damn.
I got my pro card at the Muscle Mayhem here in California.
Oh, okay, right on.
Funny story about that Canada show, though. I went down to Canada, and this guy won the show, which was funny and funny because he was the hometown hero, and I think that was one of the shows where it was, in bodybuilding, it's based off the judges, right?
For sure.
So it's one of those sports that can be somewhat painful in that sense. but at the same time, when it's so painfully obvious, like if something wasn't so obvious and I wouldn't have cared, but it's something where I just look back and I have those photos and it's like, ooh, it's just so annoying. But it is what it is.
That's right. It is what it is. Yeah, I looked back. I've learned that so like I run that Natty News Instagram page that I tagged you in and stuff. And a lot of content I've been able to dig up is on Facebook. So looking back on some old Facebook photos of yours, and I can attest to what you're referring to. I think
what I'm talking about.
And it's a little we won't get too far into that. Yeah, we won't get too far into that.
That bad.
Yeah, maybe just some poor judgment calls, but again, we won't get into that.
But I will say something. I think truthfully, what happened in that show is I think the judges probably thought I was on drugs. I think that's a factor.
You get a lot of heat on that, don't you?
Oh, I've always gotten a lot of heat on that. The first time I got, and it was kind of like a joke from my soccer teammate, but I had to take 3 years off of soccer because I had something in my knees called Osgood-Schlatter.
Yep.
So I couldn't run from 13 to 16. And when I was able to start playing soccer again, first day I get back, I'm on field at like 215. And that's from before. When I was 13, I was maybe like 170, 175. Yep. So my teammate's like, because I slide tackled his ass, he's like, what the fuck, Nsima? Is this like roid rage? And I'm like, huh. And that was the first time. And then ever since, it's just been
yeah, for those that don't know, like what are your stats? Like what are you walking around right now?
Yeah. So if anybody knows what something called the FFMI is, the fat-free mass index, I break that scale. Along with a few other people that I know. I'm around like 245. I range like 240, 245.
Yeah.
And I'm probably, when I'm 240, I'm around 9%, 8-ish, 9%. And my stage weight the last time I competed, I was on stage around 228.
Wow.
And that was maybe around 6.5 to 7%.
Yeah.
I definitely have a little bit more lean body mass on right now. So Yeah, it's let's just say, yeah, it annoys a lot of people.
Yeah,
It
for
annoys a lot
sure.
of people. And I hang with
Absolutely.
Mark Bell. So it doesn't help me out that
Yeah,
Mark is the
Mark's the
king of
test.
Instagram.
Yeah, he's the testament to natural physique progression for sure. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
That's awesome, man.
My case.
So let's go back a little bit. What got you into bodybuilding, in those earlier years?
Yeah, so it wasn't even honestly bodybuilding. Let me just raise these blinds real quick. Sorry, gentlemen.
It's all good.
Oh my fucking god.
Yeah, it's dark. It's dark here, but not in California.
You're gonna have to edit this out.
This is all in.
We found the little thing for Instagram.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
What's that? When we post this on that's gonna be the little
the clip,
soundbite or the clip.
Yeah.
Anyways,
what got me into bodybuilding? So it wasn't even bodybuilding. Like I said, I started lifting when I was 13, and that was because of Auschwitz slaughter. So my whole life I've been like a sport athlete, soccer.
Yep.
I played soccer most of my life, but also played basketball, played baseball, did a little bit of football, but my mom didn't like me getting hit, so I stopped.
Fair enough.
But when I got Auschwitz slaughter, I started into the gym because playing from 6 to 13, my routine was school, homework, soccer practice, Monday through Saturday, pretty much. And that was my routine for 7 years. And then immediately I couldn't run, so I couldn't play soccer anymore. So like I started getting super down, just depressed and shit. That was the first time in my life that I've ever actually been just like depressed. And my mom was like, okay, well, this kid needs something, an outlet.
Yep.
So she ended up getting me a gym membership. And then literally I just started lifting because it was the only thing that I quite literally could do since I couldn't run. I just started copying with the big dudes I saw in the gym. I would try to figure out when he'd go to the gym, shadow his ass, even though he didn't realize it, followed him. Back then there were bodybuilding.com forums. There was stuff on T-Nation.
T-Nation.
Yeah, T-Nation.
Classic.
T-Nation. And I just did that. I never really thought about doing and stepping onto the bodybuilding stage until I was 2013 or 2012. I think I was 20. No, I was 19. And that was the first time I thought about actually doing bodybuilding. But up until that point, I mean, I had the physique of somebody that did the bodybuilding, but my main thing was I was a sport athlete.
Yeah,
so everything that I was doing in the gym, I wanted to get bigger, I wanted to get stronger, but it wasn't for the stage, it was for the field.
Okay.
So that's how I got
So did you have an aversion to the act of actually competing then, stepping on stage as an athlete, or not really? Because I know some athletes kind of have thoughts of what bodybuilding is.
Yeah.
It's kind of a quote unquote pageant in some people's eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't have an aversion to it. It was just something that I didn't find interesting because I was a sport athlete. Like my main thing was, okay, this body or whatever that I'm building is meant to do something in sport. So I never fathomed stepping on a bodybuilding stage until this trainer that I started working with, his name was Paul Urciaga. He still trains people down here. He was like, you should do bodybuilding. I'm like, I mean, cool, but like I'm not. And when I thought of bodybuilding, I didn't even know that natural bodybuilding was a thing.
For sure.
When I thought of bodybuilding, I only knew about the NPC. And Paul's the guy who's like, no, there are federations where you don't have to do anything. You don't have to take drugs. Like the first federation I found about was the INBA. Yep. And I also learned about the NGA and the WNBF. I'm like, okay, I can get behind this because I don't really want to go down that path of,
for sure,
NPC type bodybuilding.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting that you were so against it, like right off the bat, because some people are like him and hawing, especially around that like the late teens, early 20s. Like I can speak to like that's when if I was going to make the jump, it was in those years. So it's good to hear that you were like, even then, nah, it's not for me.
Well, the thing is too, when it comes to like if we're talking about NPC and steroid use, my focus, like I played college soccer too. It was a Division I school. My thing at that point before I got injured was I want to be a professional level soccer player. Sure. So everything I was doing in lifting, I loved lifting. I never stopped lifting even as a soccer player. But like within the world of soccer, performance enhancing drugs and steroids, it's not really a topic.
Right.
And the first time like I really heard about that was, I think probably like from the Hodge twins, because that's when I started
Okay.
watching some YouTube fitness around that
Yeah.
point too. So I think I was probably 17, 18, but by that time I already had like 5 years of lifting under my belt. Like I've already been able to get pretty big. So at that point it was like, okay, there are guys that are doing some of this shit, but it's, you know, I've already done so much without it. There's no reason to really make a leap into that now.
Yeah.
You know, and
I
it's just too much unknowns. Like the amount of shit that can happen, it didn't really seem like it was worth it.
I find that your experience is one that a lot of college athletes share. I played college soccer as well at a much lower level, D3, but you know, same idea, right? You get into training for the sake of training for that sport, and the idea of taking anything just doesn't even cross your mind, because I mean, as you're approaching those, you know, tournaments, the national tournaments and stuff, like WADA testing is like you don't mess up, and they're strict about it. And it's, you know, natural bodybuilding does pretty good testing. We try and take it very strict, but you know, at the collegiate level, if you're the guy that gets kicked off your team right before the national tournament because you fail, you know, you took too much caffeine, right, or anything, it's you don't want to be that guy. So same, you know, I talk with a lot of athletes that it just, there wasn't ever the temptation because it was so ingrained, you know, that testing was already present in their life before they even got to the bodybuilding aspect of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing that I've said before, I think younger guys, it's much harder nowadays than it was when I was lifting, because number one, social media wasn't really a thing. There was really no Instagram, there was no TikTok, there was barely YouTube at the time.
Yep.
But with the amount of information that's going around, like especially if you fuck around on TikTok, you'll see these fucking 16, 17, 18-year-old dudes, they're hopping on shit. And it's like, it's normal. Like, oh, I'm on test. Like, you're on fucking testosterone as a budding, flourishing young teenager with all these crazy hormones that are going to help you grow. You're getting on testosterone. And it's something that's normal for guys now. And I even think about it. I don't know if I would have not done something because
the pressure nowadays too, right? Like you know, and we're seeing guys like, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Marine, but he's a kind of a big name on YouTube, you know, our generation. And, you know, he went on TRT and now he's coming off TRT, and it's like, you're 20, I think he's 25. Like, come on.
Yeah. Same thing with Brandon Harding. I've used Brandon Harding as an example in podcasts before, because he's super successful. And it's the one thing that people love to say is like, oh, I love Brandon Harding because he's honest. But also, Brandon Harding chose to hop on some shit when he was 3 years into lifting at 19 years old. And you can't, like, he made a video saying, like, yeah, I do my best to discourage individuals from hopping on. And at the end of the day, this is everybody's individual choice, and it's something that they want to do. If you want to do that, that's your choice. You're an adult. Hopefully, you're an adult at that time. But at the same time, like, if I was a teenager paying attention to his content and that was the person I was looking up to, and he hopped on after 3 years and he's super successful, driving nice cars, have a hot
100%.
chick, like, I'd be like, maybe that's this shit I gotta do. You
know
what
man.
I mean? So I think it's difficult for younger guys now, and I find myself lucky that I was able to lift in an era that
pre all the bullshit.
Pre all the bullshit, man. It's tough now.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And you hit the nail on the head right there with that Brandon Harding example, right? Because, you know, there's a certain ignorance is bliss when it comes to, you know, when all of us started lifting, that you didn't know about it, right? Like you looked at guys in magazines and stuff like that, and that are like clearly very large individuals, but they didn't cross your mind because you're like, well, I'm not going to look like that anyways. But now you're seeing guys, you know, with massive social media followings, hundreds of thousands, millions of followers. Yeah. And when you take someone like Brandon, where his demographic is probably 80% 18 to 21 year olds, I mean, you can't help but be influenced by that, and that, you know, appearance of success, right? The sponsorships, the money, the travel, the lifestyle. And you're like, well, frig, maybe it's all just because of the way he looks, right? And if I can do something to look like that, well, maybe I will.
Yeah, and that decision is often just taken too lightly, especially at that age. It's just, you know, it's not a decision to take lightly. And Nsima, as you said, I mean, if that's the decision you want to make, that's cool. But, you know, it's kind of like, think about it though. Like, don't, you know, give it some thought.
Oh yeah, it's a casual conversation. Oh, I'm just on test. Like, wait, what? You're 17. Like you still have exams.
Yeah, man,
Well,
it's shocking.
and two, I feel like there's so many more options now too, right? Like there's stuff in pre-workouts, right? Just an over-the-counter pre-workout, like Rich Piana's has an ingredient in it, like the turkesterone, Leroy, that we were talking about. That's not banned now, but like potentially in the future, DMAA, like all these things. You can just go to GNC and like buy something, and now all of a sudden you're no longer a natural athlete by WADA, where you don't have to pen up and inject yourself anymore. It's not this like scary thing in the weird guys in the locker room, quote unquote, not judging or anything like that. Like you said, it's your decision, but it's you take a scoop out of a tub and now all of a sudden you can't compete. So
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing because when I was, I guess, this was a few years ago, before I started doing the podcast with Mark and talking to a lot of individuals that are obviously on and they talk openly about it, I still don't, like, it's not something for me. Something that I may do when I'm older, like maybe 45, 50, 55. And I'm glad at that point, probably there's going to be more understanding behind the mechanisms behind exogenous testosterone. I might do TRT when I'm in my 50s.
Yep.
Because if I'm still performing and I'm still wanting to perform at a high level and they can make sure that these things are done in a way that still are healthy long term,
Yep.
I would fucking do it. And I'd be open about that. I'd obviously, I think I definitely would.
Yep.
But it's still not something that I think, like, TRT is supposed to be something that is, it should be something that is preventative, right? So as you get older, your testosterone starts to get lower.
Yeah, there's arguments that it could be better for you to take it, right? At that age.
It's medicinal. Yeah.
Medicinal, exactly. That was what I was looking for, right? Totally. I have no need for TRT as a almost 30-year-old man. Most guys don't. There are some guys who are young guys who, let's say, they're getting the amount of sleep they need. They're working out. They're getting sunlight. They have good nutrition, and they still have clinically low levels of testosterone. And that's just say because of their genetics. Yep. I don't think that individual should not go down the route of getting themselves some TRT and getting themselves to a place where they can actually live a quality life, right? But most guys are not in that boat. Most guys are just doing it because they want to get bigger faster. That's the main thing.
Yeah, impatient. Yep.
Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of things you can get in order before you even make that jump too, because I think there's some younger guys that, aren't consistently training, aren't consistently sleeping, aren't missing meals all the time, and then they're hopping on drugs. It's like, why don't you see if you actually like want to do this bodybuilding thing before you consider adding in that extra variable? Like, I don't know. It's just
it's
priority.
It's not to fill in the gaps where you're missing, right? Like, Nsima, you said there with like your diet and your, sleep, sunlight, training, all that stuff. Like you check all those boxes, then, that's when you would look at something like that, right? If that was the route you wanted to take. But, if you're the guy playing video games till 2 a.m., gets up and has, a sandwich and then goes to the gym and you're like, yeah, but I'm going to take TRT. Don't do that. Oh, I lost your audio, man.
Really? You can't
hear
me?
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. That's got to be closer to the mic.
Yeah. So I want to kind of transition a little bit. You've had a wide variety of guests on the podcast with Mark, ranging from all areas. And I want to know some things that you think from a bodybuilding standpoint, whether it's training, nutrition, lifestyle, that maybe are unconventional, like that would be beneficial for people to learn, whether it's like a mobility thing or it's routine, maybe it's eating raw meat. I don't know.
When it comes down to things like, for example, I guess I got stuck in somewhat of a knowledge rut in like 2016, 2015, 2016, 2017. I think those were some years where I got kind of complacent with what I already knew because what I knew worked. Yep. When I talk about what I knew, I mean talking about like what I knew in terms of like getting bigger, becoming a better athlete, your nutrition in terms of getting lean, your nutrition in terms of getting strong. I thought like, okay, you have your caloric intake, you have your protein, etc. Like, I thought I had all my bases covered. And the fun thing about doing the is I've realized just all the avenues that I didn't take or haven't thought of, or all the things that I didn't know, all the things that I didn't think could be done that I'm currently doing.
Yep.
That maybe they're not optimal, but they make certain aspects of life easier. Like I do a lot of fasting. I don't have even protein feedings during the day. I sometimes have one large bolus of protein, which, I mean, if we know anything about what the research talks about as far as muscle protein synthesis and gaining muscle, the things that I do aren't ideal. But through the years, I've continued to be able to gain small amounts of muscle tissue per year. I've been able to easily maintain a leaner physique because I have better appetite regulation because of the habits that I've been able to build from doing something like intermittent fasting.
Okay.
Although most would probably say that intermittent fasting isn't something that an individual who's trying to build muscle and trying to be a bodybuilder should do. Doing the podcast has allowed me to be more open-minded to other aspects of nutrition, other aspects of lifestyle, other aspects of training that in the past, I mean, I typically wouldn't. I typically would be just in the line and in the thought process and pattern of an individual like Lane Norton, Lyle McDonald, the guys from 3DMJ, and I love those guys, but that's where my attention and focus would be, and I wouldn't have been as open to different outlooks and applications as I am now.
Yep.
So I can't say that there's one thing that I've learned from the podcast, because I've learned a fuck ton from the podcast in terms of things that I've been able to apply and be beneficial. But the one thing that I think I've taken away, and I'll continue to take away from the podcast, is just the idea of understanding that I don't know everything, and being open but skeptical, but still open to new types of information that most in the field would not pay attention to. And when I say that, I think that a lot of people let's say they start doing stuff with bodybuilding, or maybe they start gaining some traction, let's say on social media, or they get to a certain level in terms of their athletic endeavor as far as bodybuilding is concerned. They start to feel like, I've got it, I understand it, this is what I do, this is how people should be doing it. I don't think everybody should be doing what I'm doing, but I also think that when people get to a certain level, they need to try even harder to keep an open mind, to revisit old things that they used to think were right, and either build upon those ideas, like bolster their reasoning behind what they do, why they do what they do,
Right.
or be open to changing those ideas to something that is totally different. But being open to that, being open to being able to say, I was maybe wrong about this, or I didn't have the whole idea about this, and there's a much potentially better, safer way to do X thing, and be open to that. That's what I would say to anyone that's getting better, because there's a certain point where you think you got it, but once you think that you know it, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You're truly fucked when you think that, I've got all the information I need, because that closes you off to being able to make even more progress.
Yeah, for sure.
That sticks you in a little bubble of people that are all parroting some of the same shit that you think, and that's a very dangerous place to be. And I'm happy that I don't stick in those bubbles.
Yeah.
It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything. I see it in clinical practice all the time. So the stat that's come out recently is, the evidence or clinical practice in the mainstream is 10 years behind the most relevant evidence, right? So if you're only doing what you see in the clinic or in the gym and following this has been working for this long, why would I change? You're 10 years behind, right? So you have to stay open, but like you said, skeptical, right? Because there are certainly snake oil salesmen, and there's certainly gimmicks and things like that, but there's maybe a hint of truth to some of it. And maybe you are getting results, but not for the reason you thought you were getting results.
Exactly. Like, for example, like whenever I've talked about or mentioned to people the idea of utilizing some fasting isn't magic. Like, we all know that there's still the aspect of caloric restriction. There's still the aspect of being a caloric surplus. But one of the biggest things that I've seen it do for certain individuals is changing their habits when it comes to food, and helping them not to be food focused, because they train themselves not to respond to hunger. And when you can train yourself, when your body is like, I'm hungry, feed me, and you train yourself over and over and over again not to respond to hunger, what then happens is, over time, when you, let's say you need to be in a caloric deficit, and that feeling of hunger or that pump of ghrelin comes more often because you're in a deficit, you now have the power not to continue to respond to that. So for me, deficits are extremely easy, and that's one of the big reasons why nowadays I've been able to maintain such a lean physique pretty much year round without even the feeling of like I'm dieting, because most days I'm probably in a slight caloric deficit. But in the past, if I was getting ready to be on stage, being in a deficit was a very, very, very
Yeah.
difficult thing.
The battle.
It was a battle. And I honestly think that I could get ready for a show and get stage lean without mostly feeling like shit. And I still wouldn't hang out being stage lean, because that's different from just being social media lean.
Yeah.
Stage lean is a different leanness. But at the same time, even the leanness I have right now isn't something that I would have been able to maintain back in 2014, 15, 16 with the practices I had as far as diet back then.
Sweet. I think that was a gold mine to end this on. That was perfect.
Yeah.
That was an awesome tidbit of information. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We like to keep these short and sweet, informative, and get in, get out. So again, I thank you for coming on and joining us tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. I'm glad you guys were able to do it on such short notice, and it was fun. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Wait, one more question.
you.
Any inclination to compete again?
Ever since I started focusing on jiu-jitsu, and I guess I'll end it on this. The reason I started doing jiu-jitsu is because I was an athlete first, and I was trying to find something that would allow me to use my body like I did in soccer. On soccer, I was running around a field. I was developing a skill that continued to change over time, and I did not master bodybuilding by any sense, but the progression that I'd have to continue to make year by year in bodybuilding is so minimal, and the execution of movements is so much of the same that it began to bore me.
For
And
sure.
my interest level in it, and I think that for individuals like Alberto Nunez, Jeff Alberts, fucking hell, like Doug Miller, any individual who has stuck to bodybuilding as their main thing for decades and years and hasn't drifted towards other sports, powerlifting, I don't even think it's a drift. It's still within strength.
Yeah, you're still in the realm.
Still in the realm, right? That is commendable, because that focus towards just bodybuilding, I couldn't do it. I started to get very bored, which is why when I picked up and I went to my first jiu-jitsu practice and got my ass beat by a guy that was 160 pounds when I was 260 pounds, immediately I was like, whoo, this is great. Like, cool. This is new. I can learn a lot. And even 6 years into jiu-jitsu now, I'm still learning something in every session, and the competition's fun. So I've told myself that the only way I'm going to step back on the bodybuilding stage is if I actually get the itch. And since I've been doing jiu-jitsu, I still train like a bodybuilder, but I haven't gotten the itch to cut and step back on stage.
Yep.
And when that itch comes, I'll do it, but I don't feel it yet. So.
All right. Well, Natty News Daily will be watching closely should that itch ever come back up.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Thank you.
Awesome. Social media wise, man, if people want to follow, get in touch, where do they hit you up?
Yeah, Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. And the podcast is Mark Bell's Power Project. We do a lot of fucking episodes almost every day. So it's a lot of good shit there if y'all want to check it out. But yeah, awesome. That's it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for coming on. We appreciate it. I'm sure everybody at Natty News will enjoy this episode, learn a thing or two. And again, you guys know where to follow him on every platform known to man right now. So thank you again, my man. We appreciate it. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.